Welcome to our third of 3 listening sessions regarding public input for the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA. We had 2 sessions during the day in the past week, and this is our final one where we're doing an evening. And appreciate anyone listening in and anybody who may want to give us some public input tonight. I'm Mark Roloff. I'm the city manager for the city, and the city council asked me to have some listening sessions to get input on ideas that the public may have, as well as organizations that may be interested in requesting funding. It's not so much a formal grant program, but we certainly want to get input from the public on various items. I am happy to welcome, and even though just she's in the room, you may not see her, is Councilmember Lindsay Erickson. Good evening, Councilmember Erickson. For the record, Lindsay waved to everybody. I'm just going to do a real brief overview of the ARPA program, what we know about it so far, and what we can tell you about it. So there's a slide that we have for everybody to take a look at. The American Rescue Plan Act has really 4 general types of criteria or areas that the federal government is agreeing to fund. The first one is to address economic impacts caused by COVID-19 with assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofit agencies, and impacted industries, including tourism. The second general use is to replace lost revenue to the public sector, in our case, the city of Oshkosh. The third general use is to provide premium pay for eligible essential workers. And the fourth one is to invest in water, sewer, stormwater, and broadband infrastructure. Within those categories, there's some interpretations and various ideas that we can expand upon, but generally we need to follow those guidelines before we get started. So that's kind of an overview of the program itself. We are welcoming input from the public at least through July 9th. That's sort of a date that we put in there really just to get people on a timeline to get input. We are doing these public input sessions. We also have forms available on the city's website that you can fill out. If you're a citizen who wants to make a suggestion, it's a real simple 1-page suggestion form. Tell us what you think, give us your input, and we'll look at that. And we also have, for nonprofit groups, businesses, individuals who may feel they are eligible under this program, to submit a request. Again, it's not a formal grant application. If we want to take this further with you, we can certainly follow up with you, but I didn't feel it was appropriate to ask for a bunch of information that may or may not go somewhere. So we'll take a look at those. And we also are actively seeking input through the city's Palco survey tool. You can find that on our website as well. And it's just a brief survey to tell us where you feel some of our priorities may be. So I encourage you to use any of those methods to contact us with your input. With that, out of courtesy to the people who are watching or listening online, I know there's someone named Nick who was in the audience just prior to the meeting that he may wish to provide some input. And certainly if your input includes a question, feel free to do that. But Nick, are you with us, and do you have a comment or a question? Nick, we can't hear you, so just hang on a moment.
All right.
Oh, hear you now.
Oh, you heard me? Okay.
I can hear you now. Nick, if you could do me a favor and just give us your name, and if you're representing any organization, that would be great. If you're a private citizen, you just give us your name, and we appreciate you tuning in tonight. Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, my name is Nick Matisic. Um, and I guess for questions, I think most of the areas outlined in those 4 points are stuff I like very much agree with and think is beneficial to the community. I suppose the questions I would have then is for possible interpretations or eligibility within those guidelines. Are things areas that I would possibly want funding to go to would be homelessness, rent and mortgage relief, I think is a very prominent issue that affected a lot of people through COVID-19 pandemic that should be touched upon, along with tourism, yeah, like local arts and events within the community, which obviously took a big hit over the past year or so. And then along with water and broadband infrastructure, is there any plans to do anything about like solar or electric power renovation?
Okay. Nick, just because I was busy taking notes, the first couple items, you mentioned homelessness, and then you said, what were the other items regarding housing?
Rent and mortgage relief.
Okay. Thank you. Were there any other items that you saw as being needs that you would like to see addressed through this funding?
A few, but I think most of those were already outlined in the main, like 4 points for obviously areas that were most heavily affected by COVID-19, essential worker reimbursement, public parks, relative infrastructure. Those were like some of my other like issues of topics, but I believe that's, was the plan initially.
Okay. Well, Jake, if you could put back on the slide just for folks who may be watching later on, so I can just give a little overview. The issue of homelessness is technically addressed in item number 1, economic impacts, assistance to household and small businesses. One of the things and that was specifically mentioned. I just didn't read all of the details straight from the law. So homelessness and rent and mortgage relief were all listed as potential items and as examples of how that addressing economic assistance to individuals impacted. So those are definitely items within the ARPA guidelines. Tourism is right there with number 1, and that's obviously a big hit that our room tax fund, which funds our Convention and Visitors Bureau, and technically it also involves support to impacted industries. So technically that's anything that could be arguably linked to tourism, be it hotels or other amenities or facilities, whether it's private or public, that are geared towards tourism. Water broadband is right there in number 4. Solar electric is a little different. We're not sure if that specifically is allowed in the guidelines. However, one of the things that staff is reviewing is actually number 2 on this list, replace lost revenue. We've been able to identify revenues that were lost that we may or may not have been able to offset that revenue loss with expenditure cuts. And that represents an opportunity because if we can demonstrate lost revenue, then we can, once we qualify those as lost revenues, then the council has the discretion to use those funds on anything because it goes back to the general fund and it becomes part of our fund balance. And so there's actually some opportunities that may allow us to be a little more flexible. You mentioned parks, and I'm not sure if parks necessarily qualify as one of the 4 areas, but to the degree that those lost revenues can free up and make it more flexible for council to exercise discretion, those are examples. That's just one example of where council might be able to exercise some authority. So fortunately, with your question, I think most, if not all of those things can be covered either directly or indirectly. So did that answer your question, or do you have any follow-ups with that? Because Nick, I really appreciate you being here tonight, because right now you're my only guest besides my council member, and my council member has plenty of opportunities to give me her input. So Nick, do you have anything else for us?
No, off the top of my head, I don't think so. Yeah, I think that answered my questions, like wondering like what I felt was like most important for funding to go to. It feels like there already is the direct concern, or there's a possibility for those to be interpreted for those funds. And I haven't yet, but I do very much plan to fill out the Polco survey.
That would be wonderful, because what we're trying to do is, everything's important. I mean, I've heard over the past 3 sessions a variety of things, and you yourself gave some very good suggestions, and I do appreciate that, and I think the council will appreciate that. What we plan to do is we plan to take all these comments and summarize them. I'm not going to attribute them necessarily to an individual, but I can, what I do enjoy doing is sort of give any backstory that you can provide, and people have provided me backstories, and to give some depth to these ideas and suggestions. And then the council can get a feel for the background, why people feel that some of these items are appropriate. And I want to do that, but we'll provide them general suggestions. And so you gave us a lot. You had homelessness, rent and mortgage relief, tourism, water, broadband, solar, electric. So a lot of different ideas. We'll list those kind of separately. Not that that was your comment, it was one of those things. And if somebody else, for example, mentioned solar, we're going to mention that in there as well, so that we give the council a flavor of the different suggestions and the number of times it was repeated. So all of these types of things are going to be on the list. So welcome you to fill out the Polco survey and be part of the results for that. So is there anything else? Because I really do appreciate your providing input to us.
Sure. Thanks very much for having me. I guess my last question would be, after these sessions and after the Polco survey time range ends, which is through July, what are the next steps for the city?
Yeah, thank you, because you just reminded me a couple of things that I neglected to mention during this. The federal rules for the use of ARPA funds require us to commit the funds by the end of 2024 and to have them spent by the end of 2026. So we really do have time, and I think given the input we've received so far, and one of the other things that we've looked at is potential items that might come up that we haven't even realized yet. And so I have a term that I use with staff often, is we need to keep our powder dry. So even though we've asked for this, and I say deadline, and I really use that term loosely, of July 9th, it's really more to get ideas from the public. I think this is more likely than not going to be a more open-ended process, but we did want to get ideas from the public because it's fresh in your minds, you're aware of it, we're trying to educate people as much as possible. So I expect that when council starts looking at it, it'll be more about, do we have any urgent needs that we should fill now? And are there any delayed needs that we need to hold off on allocating money until we know the full depth of our problem? A good example that you cited, Nick, which was very helpful, was tourism. Specifically, it's tourism and lost revenues. Our room tax really took a hit. Our room tax, 60% of our room tax dollars support our Convention and Visitors Bureau. So they took a huge hit, had to do significant cutbacks to merely survive. And we also had continuing obligations, part of our room tax funds, the debt for our convention center. The debt didn't go away because of COVID, but the money went away. And so the way the rules are written, we can recover funds lost up until the end of 2023. So by that example alone, we aren't going to know the impact of lost revenue there until early 2024. So for that reason, we need to keep options open if we want to recover some of those funds. And that's just one example. With the Delta variant out there, there may be some other delayed reactions. We sure hope and pray that that doesn't come to pass. But if some other impact were to be there, we want to make sure that we have resources available to address things that may happen. And if they don't, then we can revisit all the other ideas and suggestions that we've received. What's going to happen with, the one of rent and mortgage relief? I mean, all those things. Or at the end, are there opportunities? Let's say we didn't fund anything with broadband, and at the end, it's like, well, we have $1 million that we haven't allocated. Are there any broadband opportunities? Those are just examples that with all of the items you mentioned, they really provide me with a lot of different examples of things that the council can consider. So I'll probably suggest some things up front, but I think we're not going to allocate the whole thing. And based on what council's been learning, I'm getting the feeling that they don't want to commit the bulk of these funds until after they soak in all the other ideas and suggestions and unmet needs. So thank you. Is there anybody else listening in? Okay, well, thank you, Nick. I really appreciate your input. Well, I don't have any other audience that is interested in providing any input at this time, so I do want to thank you. If you're watching this on delay, thank you for watching and listening, and certainly encourage you to fill out the forms that are online, do the Pulco survey that's available on our website, and submit forms or ideas to give us more ideas about where we can potentially look forward to. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and thanks again for participating in your local government, and have a great evening.